Welcome to today's panel session as part of the Accelerating Impact series. My name is Vicki Main, and on behalf of the Women and Infants Research Foundation, also known as WIRF, we are delighted to welcome you here online today. This online initiative brings together researchers, healthcare professionals, and community stakeholders to advance women's health, pregnancy, and infant care. In alignment with this year's International Women's Day theme, Accelerate Action, we are focusing on the urgent need to overcome systematic barriers to gender equality. This is our first ever event, and we're running 3 more this year. We'll be recording this event, and it will be shared across our social media channels. Everyone apart from our panel guests will be on mute. However, there will be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. Please pop them in the comments box. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise the continuing connection to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to land, culture and community. We extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people on the call today. Today we'll hear from inspiring leaders and experts who have driven change, empowering women in science and creating equal opportunities for the next generation of leaders. Let's dive into a discussion on how we can all contribute to breaking down barriers and accelerating progress. Now I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we have Deb Attard Portughes, and she's the CEO and Director of the Women and Infants Research Foundation. Deb oversees operations and aligning them with strategic goals. With expertise in business development, marketing and fundraising, she previously served as a development executive at the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. Before moving to Australia, Deb taught creative thinking with Professor Edward de Bono in Malta and held roles as a mediator and executive producer of a current affairs programme. Welcome, Deb.
Thanks, Vicki.
Next up, we have Professor Matt Kemp, who is an Honorary Associate Professor at Toyoko University Hospital and Visiting Professor at Chenong Women and Children's Hospital. He is also an Associate Professor in Obstetrics and Gynecology at the National University of Singapore and Director of Research for Obstetrics and Gynecology at the National University Health System. His work focuses on developing research links and building perinatal research capacity across Japan, Singapore, and Western Australia. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Vicki. That's a bit of a mouthful.
It is, but what a fantastic, it's great to have you here, and it's been great working with you as well and doing some amazing things, which I know you're going to share with us very soon. We also have Hannah Watson is on the call with us, who's a research assistant at Women and Infants Research Foundation at WIRF. Erin Fee is unfortunately unable to join us today, but Hannah has very kindly stepped in, and Hannah is doing some fantastic projects around sheep modelling in pregnancy, with particular focus on optimisation of antenatal steroid therapy and artificial placenta development projects. Quite a lot there. Wow, Hannah, welcome. And in your honours research, you also looked at the correlation between green space exposure and suicidal ideation. And you've also looked at, in your post-graduation, you've looked at and assisted people with brain injuries and also in their rehabilitation journey. And it's great for you to be here today, Hannah, to join us. So thank you.
Thanks, Vicki.
And we also have, last but by no means least, Joanne Beedie, who is the CEO of Helping Little Hands, and you support families of premature and sick babies. And it's great to have you here today, Joanne, and share your experiences as a parent of a premature baby as well, and your expertise in the not-for-profit sector. And you empower families, and you also help and support with childcare needs with families as well. So it's great to have you here. And I know you've got extensive experience in charity with stakeholder and community engagements and board governance, strategic direction. So I'm really excited to invite you all here today. So thank you for that. That's wonderful. So let's get started on the panel questions, and there will be a chance at the end for everybody to, any guests on might want to add some questions in the comments box. So first of all, Hannah, we'll start with yourself, and I'd like to ask you what inspired you to pursue a career in research and also in the medical field, and what drives your commitment in this area?
Hi, thanks, Vicki. My career in medical research is still very much in its infancy. I have been with the Women and Infants Research Foundation for nearly 12 months now. But my inspiration for pursuing this path stems from my previous experiences in the healthcare setting, and I believe that's something I share with quite a few of my colleagues here. Before I transitioned into research, I came from a psychology background, and I loved the work. It was super meaningful, but I often felt that by the time I was involved, the scope of what could be done to improve long-term outcomes was quite limited. And so I was drawn to medical research because it offers the opportunity to take a more proactive approach, one that focuses more on maybe preventing and mitigating health issues before they reach that advanced stage. And I think what drives my commitment to this field in particular, women and reproductive health, is the highly translational nature of our work. I think medical research doesn't exist in isolation, and I love that what we do has such a direct and meaningful impact on women's care and kind of shapes the way that healthcare can be delivered. What I've come to learn so far with being at WIRF is that while advancements in healthcare continuously improve outcomes, they also bring new challenges, new risks, new complications, and so room for new research. And so that's what really excites me and kind of drives my commitment to my research contributions with WIRF.
Thank you for that. And you're such a great role model, inspiring for young people who want to go into this field of research and science. And, can you share a pivotal moment in your journey in this space, or maybe a mentor that shaped your career and approach to science along the way?
Yeah, I love that question. I feel incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by supportive and experienced mentors at WIRF. My entire research team has years, if not decades, sorry, Matt, of knowledge and expertise beyond my own. And I think particularly during our heavy research intensive period here in Perth, the willingness of the team to kind of share their time and generosity with their guidance, it really reinforced the collaborative nature of good science. And I think as someone that's still, in the very early stages of my research career, I don't have a single pivotal moment or mentor to point to just yet, but I see that, this collective mentorship of my team, I see it as an ongoing influence, and I think one that will likely shape my career and approach to science for a very long time.
That's fantastic, and you can see your enthusiasm for what you're doing. It's great to see that. I'd like to ask Matt a question around, Matt, can you share some current research projects that you're leading? I know there are many, and what you're involved with, and how these initiatives contribute to advancing our understanding of women's health and medical science.
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. I think Hannah's made some comments. I think that was the nicest way I've been called old in a very long time. So WIRF supports a range of projects in newborns and maternal and women's health. And I think one of the things that we've been making quite an important target for us to do, certainly in the past 2 or 3 years, is is broaden our work out from what was historically probably more of a focus on high-risk obstetrics and maternal fetal medicine. And we're now doing a lot more in terms of midwifery research, nursing research. We're interested doing sort of more qualitative and service improvement research, as well as keeping on with the more traditional sorts of quantitative and intervention research. So I think it's a really exciting time for science at WIRF. And in terms of the projects that I'm involved with directly, Hannah mentioned a couple of them. We have a fairly long-running history of working with an intervention known as antenatal corticosteroid therapy. This is a treatment that's given to women who are at risk or judged to be at risk of imminent preterm delivery. The primary desired outcome for this particular intervention is precocious maturation of the fetal lung, so to help these babies breathe easier with less stress and less injury when they're born. This is a really interesting innovation. It's been in clinical use for about 50 years. We're only really starting to get a handle on how can we best deliver these drugs in terms of the dose that we're giving, because steroids, of course, are not innocuous agents. They do lots of different things. How can we best deliver them over a particular period of time to maximize benefit and minimize harm? And then perhaps just as importantly, why is it that the very substantial number of babies that are seeing these treatments on target don't respond with the lung maturation benefits we might otherwise like to see? So there's a lot of that work going on. It's done collaboratively between Perth, a couple of places in the United States, our good friends in Sendai in Japan, of course, in Singapore. So we're doing some really interesting things in this area. We're also starting to do some work on the long-term benefits, but also harms of or potential harms of antenatal steroids, looking at the potential programming effects of this intervention. So lots of work in that area. The artificial placenta therapy that, again, Hannah mentioned, this work is really interesting. It started off initially as developing a new life support platform for babies that are born right down at the border of viability, 21, 22, maybe 23 weeks of gestation. These are the babies that historically don't do well on pulmonary respiration. And so trying to devise a means by which we can have them breathe through an artificial placenta that's attached to the umbilical cords, that take advantage of what really is fetal anatomy and physiology, and try and give these babies another month or so to grow in a simulated in utero environment, so we can transition them to breathing room air in a safe and healthy manner. What's really interesting about this project is that it's evolved a lot. We're still very enthusiastic about this core translational work, but we've also managed to develop the technology to the point where we have a really neat placental knockout system. So we can start getting some really unique and important information about how the placenta in the maternal compartment signals to the fetus in terms of its early growth. And this is going to allow us to develop some new therapies, we hope, for in utero growth restriction to better understand placental health, perhaps develop some new therapies for babies that are born preterm, lose that placental input early in gestation, and help support normal growth. So there's lots of really interesting things going on around there. Without taking up a lot of time, we're doing some quite interesting fetal diagnostics work using minimally invasive approaches to try and work out how mature is the fetal lung. Is there likely to be an infection in play in pregnancy? We're interested more broadly in developing some new screening tests for things like ovarian cancer, things that are difficult to detect, have a real impact on health, and have quite often a very poor prognosis. And then just for something slightly left field, we're interested in space pregnancy as well, both from a very long-term horizon, but also because things like microgravity and radiation are really interesting biological tools to dissect functional systems and gain a better appreciation for some of the core biology that feeds into some of our other disease-focused work.
Yeah, wow, thank you, Matt. That's fascinating in terms of the depth and breadth of research. And I know I've been here for 3 months now, and it's amazing what your team of researchers are doing. So thank you for sharing that. And if anybody on the call wants to know more about what we do in our research, please contact us. I'll leave a email at the end there. But as we are coming to International Women's Day, Matt, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the biggest barriers you've observed in advancing gender equality in medical research from a male perspective?
Yeah, so thanks. So that's in many ways that answering that question makes the research side of things look a lot more straightforward. And there's some real challenges in this area, as I think probably most people on this call will appreciate. From my perspective, I think you can look at it from being challenges that relate to the external horizon. So these are broader societal challenges. And then I think there are some other challenges that are specific to the sort of the university academic environment itself. And of course, they don't operate in isolation. They're interactive, but I think it's helpful to look at them in terms of those two components. I think if we start with an external environment, and these are things that probably won't surprise many of the people on this call, I think we're still working through some fairly large disparities in terms of expectations around who looks after children, about the acceptability of people taking long amounts of leave, and in particular, I'd say the boys here, to take care of family situations. I think for aging parents as well, I think one of the things that's not as well appreciated as it might be is that we do have an aging society. In addition to looking after children, there's a lot of family responsibility for looking after older parents as well. And I think, as is often the case, that responsibility does tend to fall on the ladies as probably more than it does the boys. So I think there's some real challenges around that continual recalibration. I think there's been some really great progress in that area. I think there needs obviously to be a lot more done. I think in terms of structural changes, I think we've made a lot of progress in terms of paid parental leave. I think some more of the societal expectations, we have to keep shifting that needle. But I think we're making some good progress in that area. I think if you want to look internally at university systems, the way in which even early education systems, and I'm talking about PhD level training systems here, the way those are conceptualized and constructed are particularly challenging from an equitable access and progression perspective. I think that some of the work that we've done around how PhD students go through learning processes, I think there are some big difference between genders. I think that there's some really important work to be done around how students are learning in those particular environments. We know social and peer interactions are really important, but people approach those in different ways. I think one of the other challenges is around how early career progression is conceptualized and developed and supported. I think there's some quite big challenges. But we have increasing difficulty in recruiting people into research, and that's males and females. I think we've made some really good strides in bringing up the ratios at fairly early career stages. I think postdoctoral and then maybe level A and B, perhaps even level C, but not quite so much above that. And I think really this is a structural problem in terms of how career progression is developed and metriced, both from a funding perspective, but also from a promotions perspective. So I think we've come a long way externally. I don't think we've come nearly as far internally in the university and academic sector about trying to balance the playing field a little, and especially at more senior levels.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. And if anybody has any questions for Matt directly, please pop them in the comments box. You covered a lot there, and I think you highlighted some really key areas, and notably about looking after older parents as well. I think that's absolutely a key. And so we'll talk a bit more about what you've said in more depth as well as we go through. But I'd like to ask Joanne and invite Joanne to ask, what are the biggest challenges you face as a not-for-profit leader in the health sector, and how do you navigate these challenges to ensure Helping Little Hands continues to make a tangible impact?
Thanks, Vicki. When I read this question, I thought, oh gosh, there's a bit of reflection here, particularly on the challenges and the tangibility of Helping Little Hands impact. So I suppose I had to kind of think back to the landscape of not-for-profits in WA and further afield to start with, it's really busy and it's a complex environment. Then you add in the element of being within the space of health, and has already been covered, that can span from the research done by teams like WIRF through to organisations like ours at Helping Little Hands, which offers much more socioeconomic supports, but within a health scenario. But sometimes navigating that diverse space of health is really tricky because there are so many layers. So when you're working within that space, you've got state provision, you've got other charitable organisations, and we're at various scales with different offerings. So I think one of the challenges, or one of the ways I've tried to mitigate some of that, is within the role of a leader of an organisation, is that we need to ensure that our contribution enhances the collective impact to the community that we serve. We all need to be aware of our organisation's unique features and be very clear in our own purpose and mission and carve out a space for ourselves within that landscape. But we also have to be really cognizant of the fact that the impact comes from basically genuine collaboration with others and avoiding duplicity in services. So when leaders can work with other leaders in open and transparent ways, the greater impact's made. So no one organisation can do all things, and we need to understand what we can do and what we can't do and find out how we can work together collaboratively. And I hope that approach has helped Helping Little Hands make our tangible impact to the families that we serve, being premature and sick baby families. And then I had to think of it from another sort of angle. I would say that was more of a landscape challenge. But when we've been running for about 8 years now, and I think we've worked hard, and I think we've worked smart. But we've got to a point where in the community, people know of our name and they know what we do, but they also think that we're bigger than we actually are. And that comes with then managing expectations. And I think we need to be constantly trying to punch above our weight to a level. But to keep progressing, I think we have to have that strong belief in the quality of what we're offering, that we're a trustworthy and reliable service. So that's been an internal challenge for us to manage. We continually want to strive to do more, but equally we want to do it really well. So that's an ongoing challenge internally, but I hope that might be interesting to others to hear.
Thank you, Joanne. And certainly, having worked with you, I certainly can see that you walk the talk in terms of collaboration. That's embedded in your DNA in terms of what you do. And it's great to have you here. And I know you're going to share some more insights as well as we go through the panel session. I'd like to segue to Deb. Deb, you have, as a CEO and director, you have extensive experience in leadership and at WIRF, and talking about ensuring gender equality is not just a priority, but embedded within the core of our culture at WIRF and operations and leadership. Talk us through what that means for you and how that is embedded.
Thanks, Vicki. I also want to comment on, I do first think, Joanne does walk the talk. And I think one of the things why, Joanne, you've done amazingly well is you really do partnerships very well. So I commend you for that. Now back to my question. So I guess, for us at WIRF, gender equality is not just a goal. It's embedded in our culture, in our leadership, and also in our operations. So our WIRF board and our leadership team and staff reflect a very strong female representation. And we also ensure that the diverse voices that we have guide our strategic direction. So we're not just, we're not just saying it, but we're living it. So but I guess probably more than that, we do foster a very inclusive and supportive workplace where women can thrive professionally and personally. And, I know a lot of people say this and we don't, but it was really lovely hearing Hannah and talk about her experience and how she feels supported and mentored. And I also feel that, you also have to have the great male role models and mentors to really fulfill this. So someone like Matt, we're incredibly fortunate that Matt is who he is and does what he does. at such a young age, Matt, too, I might add, Hannah. So, but like my leadership philosophy, I guess, is built on authenticity, care, and purpose. We're here for a purpose. We're here to save mothers and babies and have healthy families. So, but also, I also believe that charity begins at home. So I check regularly with my team, not just about work, but about their personal life and well-being. Because I can't, I don't believe we can save mothers and babies and have healthier families unless we're looking after ours first and foremost. So, but we do actively support women in leadership, and we offer flexibility, for example, to anyone returning back from maternity leave, or most of us have children, but we also make sure we provide pathways for growth. I guess we're very, very fortunate. We have exceptional staff retention. And I do believe that, we do have a culture where people feel valued, supported, and empowered. At least I hope you do. And I guess I should, put that question back on you, Vicki. You've been here for 3 months, but Hannah's been here for nearly a year. And Matt and I have worked together. I've been here for 8 years. So it's kind of, I can say it, but you guys can say it much better than me if that's how you feel.
Absolutely. And I can Hannah might want to add to this. I've really enjoyed being part of the team, and what you've said is spot on. You do walk your talk too, and I think Matt is, I would say, like the rock star of the scientific world in terms of what he's doing out there, and he really is a great ambassador to support women in STEM roles and in leadership roles as well. It's great to be part of the team. Hannah, do you want to add anything to that as well? You're welcome to. I know I'm putting you on the spot there.
I also think it's been great to have the connection between what you guys are doing, Deb and Vicki, over in the office there, and the research team. So we've got like a really nice collaboration, not just within our research team, but across the whole of WIRF, and across, me starting from a research assistant all the way through to the professors or the people that have, years in neonatology. I think, across all professions, there's like a really nice collaboration.
Yeah, fantastic. Deb, I want to go back to when you were talking about leadership. What would you say or believe is the biggest barriers women face when advancing in leadership careers and roles, and how is WIRF addressing these challenges to create an equal playing field?
Yeah, well, I guess Matt said this very well. Probably one of the biggest barriers for women is balancing career with personal and family responsibilities. So, whether it is our children, whether it is, what we're doing at home, or parents, I do love the fact that Matt mentioned parents, because we don't really think about that, but kind of most of us are in that sandwich, generation, when you've got kids and you've got parents getting older. And because we are having kids older as well, we're getting to that point much quicker. I guess I'm Maltese, and, in my generation, we used to have babies earlier before, and that meant your parents pretty much, your mother was mostly at home, you split the days where she's looking after your baby and you're going to work, and vice versa. But I guess the older we get, the less that is happening, because, by the time I had my babies, I was 38 and mum was in Malta. So that was even harder, but still, you know what I mean? So I think that's changing, and that puts a bit more pressure on us. But I think also systematic biases and a lack of mentorship opportunity does play a role. And, at WIRF, we do try and do our best to address these challenges, so fostering a culture where we prioritize work-life balance. We provide flexible working arrangements, and we try and, look at leadership pathways that empower our staff, and especially our women, to step into senior roles. And I personally lead by example. I'm, showing that ambition and family life can coexist. I make sure I go and pick up my son at least twice a week from school to be there for him. Yeah, I go back to home and then I continue to work, but we have that flexibility. And I also make sure that everyone here, like, if you've got a sick child at home, if there's an assembly, you do not want to miss these important days in your kids' lives, or, you go. And I think, Joanne can talk to this even better than me, because I feel a bit like a fraud. I've only got the one child. She's got 4 of them. So, and she's amazing. She's superwoman. So, but that is a reality of us, and a lot of women prefer to stay home and look after the baby rather than go to work. So we have, we have all, and that's why we can do what we do, because there's different roles that we all play. But for us, I guess at WIRF, leadership is about impact, and we're committed to ensuring women have the opportunity and that we support them for them to lead with purpose, because all we do is about purpose, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Joanne, would you like to add any comments or thoughts around what Deb said?
Yes, I think it comes down to that for women, particularly in the age with young children, the juggle is real. And I have definitely, to use a phrase that's already been used, have walked the talk of that. I have juggled 4 little children. And I often joke that my daughters particularly, they didn't go to ballet classes and gym classes. They would come to me with meetings and committees, and would sit with me at the dining room table as I worked. And at some points, yes, we can bring in that maternal guilt to it too, but I don't think that's always that useful. What I've tried to turn that into is setting an example of purpose to my children, to all of them. And that would be my sons and my daughters. I have 2 of each. So, I've done my equal contribution to the gender distribution of the future. But I think this gender discussion is not specifically only to hone in on the females. I think we have to really work with the boys, the men. It's a community discussion around how we accelerate equality. But it's not to say that I haven't also come across some of those challenges. The challenges are real. And I think Matt really talked on a wider, I suppose, system level, universities, institutions. But I think what we've not touched on is the wider, just societal view. There's still a huge shift to be made there. And it's great organisations like WIRF, just doing such tremendous work to progress their female researchers and really got things built into their structures, but we need it across the board. And unfortunately, I don't have all the answers to that.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. That's great there. I'd like to segue to Matt. In terms of being a leader in the scientific community, what do you believe are the most urgent actions that need to be taken to accelerate gender equality in research? I know you've touched upon quite a lot, but what would you say, and how can our male allies actively contribute towards this progress? It's a big question.
Yeah, no, I was saying thanks for the softball questions, Vicki. That's really kind of you. Look, I think there's some easy things that we can do. Well, when I say easy, and then I think there's some harder ones, and these are systematic things. I think the really easy things that you can do is really accessible, cost-effective childcare that you can access close to wherever it is you need to be working, and you don't have to wait 6 months a year to get into these sorts of things. These are easy things to do. Having a working system that is really flexible to family and personal needs. I mean, the hard reality is in biomedical academic industry research, this whole notion of punching the clock is pretty outdated. This is not a fast food restaurant, and it doesn't matter when you're there. The reality is that you're there to be productive, to drive innovation and get things done. And if you can do that working from 4 o'clock in the morning through to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then go home and be productive, then I would say knock yourself out. And the same for other sorts of arrangements. So I think, having more flexibility in how we conceptualize productivity and work and getting things done is really important. I think we need to reframe the zeitgeist around, how, there's all sorts, families are more complex and, more diverse now than I think probably, any time in history, at least in terms of how they're acknowledged. I think, having this, setting the zeitgeist around, that it's, anyone can take on the mental load for running, a house, whatever that might look like, managing their family situation, and making sure that it's just a no-brainer that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. If you have to do that, then that's fine, and it's not just it's just not just assumed that just because you're female you're going to take on those responsibilities, and whereas if you're male, then you're expected to stay back and work till later 9 o'clock at night because that's just the done thing. So I think those sorts of conceptual changes are really, really important. I think some of the harder ones relate to around how our research sector is structured. I think we need to take a very long, very hard look at how PhD programs are operated in Australia. I think they're long. My personal view is that they're really no longer fit for purpose. I think they're outmoded. I think that for a system that's supposed to represent the highest level of academic achievement at a university, they're more often than not based on empirical evidence. They're not data-driven for their learning systems in the way that undergraduate education systems and professional vocational training systems increasingly are. I think that if you look at the numbers or even just look around undergraduate biology and life sciences classes, this is our area of work, I would say that there's more female representation in undergraduate life sciences biology than there is males. I would think if you were looking, I don't have the latest data, but I think if you were looking at life sciences PhDs, I think there would be a pretty even gender balance. I think there might be more females than males. I don't know that for sure. But what we're not seeing is that feed through to level C, D, and E academic appointments. So you senior lecturer, associate professor, and professor. And so I think, well, without a doubt, there's some of the very historical sorts of biases and barriers that we're all really aware of in play. I think we need to step back and look at why is the structure that we're operating these systems on also not conducive to the sorts of changes that we want to see. Because I think that it's a terrible shame if we are taking large numbers of girls and boys into these PhD systems, promising them something promising them an academic career and a chance at being an associate professor or a professor, when the harsh reality is for 99% of those people, that reality is just not going to be an option. So I think we need to have a very strong look at how we're taking, incredibly valuable periods of people's lives. Your 20s and 30s are extremely, extremely valuable, and setting people up for perhaps not what we're promising them.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, really great. Some great ideas there about how we could really look at enhancing, what's already happening and contributing towards progress. I think certainly there's a lot to unpick there. I'd like to ask you all, in terms of, as a panel, taking action for gender equality, I'd like to put it out there. In your view, what would you say is anybody else who has any urgent actions we need to take now to accelerate gender equality in medical research? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? I know Matt's covered quite a lot.
Somebody mentioned mentoring. So when I was giving this question some thought, and it's probably been covered, I looked at it as a system level, but also on that individual level. So I think we've talked quite a little on the system level, institutions, but I think on the individual level, things like somebody mentioned mentoring, even Vicki, your new role, the possibilities within that space to encourage and push and stretch our young female scientists. That is a great model, and I'm really excited to see where that takes you and the scientists that you're going to work with, and hopefully maybe next year you can tell us some of the impacts to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I look forward to that, and certainly we're, as Joanne mentioned, I might just highlight, we are looking at some great work in terms of enhancing the talent within our early career researchers and mid-career researchers across the ecosystem as well, because there's a lot of work to be done, and that will involve extensive mentoring from some great people who are part of the network and supporting male and female researchers. So it's great that we're doing this now, because in 5 years from now we'll certainly see the impact and the benefits for sure. So next question, I'm wondering, what legacy do you hope to leave for future women in science, and how can young women be empowered to continue driving gender equality and leadership in research? And this is for any of you on the panel. Hannah, you're welcome to take the lead on this one.
I did think you might say that. I do think that Deb touched on a really good point of, of leading by example. And I don't think that necessarily has to come from the highest, position in a business. It can come from anywhere. And I think building a culture of inclusion and support, and I think for me as a young woman, like saying yes to opportunities like today, and be encouraged to take up space and ask questions and challenge biases and really validate that their perspectives and place in science is essential. And yeah, I just think that can come from anyone at any level of experience.
Absolutely, and I think you're quite right. I think we can all be the change we want to see. It sounds a cliche, but it's certainly if we all, I can remember it was about 10 years ago when I first moved to Australia. I remember having a conversation with a board director and a CEO from a company which I will not name. And I asked them how many female board members they had on their board. And they said, we have one person out of 10. And I thought, actually, I need to be the change I need to see. So I went and did my company director course and started to go on boards, because I thought, if I can sit and, talk about it and pontificate about it, but actually I need to go and be the change. So that was something that I did and thought, right, and then went to go on boards and became a board chair. So that was something that I did personally. But I think you've touched upon some really great points there, Hannah, for sure. Can we take some questions from the audience? Would anybody like to add questions in there, or would anybody like to ask the panel any questions? Feel free to jump in if you would like to. Otherwise, I've got more questions here that I can share. While we're waiting for any of those to come in, I'd like to ask you all if you could make one change tomorrow or even today to accelerate gender equality in medical research, what would it be? And what key message would you share with those working to create change in science and medicine? It's a big question.
Lots of big questions, Vicki.
What would your thoughts be, Joanne?
And I think this would stem beyond just science, but when I was trying to give this some thought, and it was a phrase I had never heard until I moved to Australia, that the cultural expression of the tall poppy syndrome, and just how damaging that is. But if we really then hone into the space of science, the idea that our community in any way would demean or cut down someone who's talented and striving for impact, change that will impact the community, it's incredibly damaging. So I would wish that for the women who are talented and have access, have research success, that they just stand tall. And as a community, we really all need to help stamp out those attacks to those people.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I know when I've chatted with lots of researchers in my career, and often they're fantastic at research, but not always showcasing and sharing their gifts in terms of like awards. It might seem as there's something to be said for being humble, but I think if you're doing some great work in research, apply for awards, apply for, and Matt, I mean, you might want to add to this. I mean, certainly you've got a plethora of publications and doing some great work in the research space, and when you look at what you've actually achieved, you've got an incredible career and raised funds from various sources across the world and collaborating with people and in the world. And, you know, we have a top class researcher like yourself, Matt, working as a chief scientist with us. And surely, you know, there must be, you know, some areas that, you could add to that in terms of what Joanne said there about really how do you think researchers need to put themselves out there more? Like on LinkedIn, for example? I'm curious.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, I think one of the underappreciated challenges for researchers per se is that I don't think it's well enough appreciated that research is now a business like a lot of other businesses. It's a special business, and it has I mean, it would never survive as a commercial business because you essentially scrounge for money to do a bunch of work that you then essentially pay to publish somewhere. So it's completely broken from that perspective. But you have to conceptualize it like a business. You have to keep a very tight view on what your inputs and your outputs are, and what you're doing now and in 2 years and in 5 years and in 10 years time. You do have to try and promote what you're doing. I think it's challenging because the sorts of people that we want, I think that we genuinely want to be doing science, and I do believe that those that are going to drive the biggest impact are those that are interested in doing the science and not particularly interested in all the fluff and the fanfare that goes with it. So I think there's a real internal tension there. But I do agree that I think without trying to commodify scientific research in a really commercial way, I think we do need to encourage scientists, and especially our junior scientists, to look at their lab operations as being a business, and that they've got to promote themselves. They've got to be engaging with their funders, with the people that they're serving, and a variety of other stakeholders. So I think that is really important. So, you know, perhaps one of the things that we're trying to do more as an organization is push some more of those entrepreneurial, slightly more business school constructs of looking at your research career, and adapting to what is a very quickly moving research landscape. Funding is increasing. I know everyone says funding is increasingly tight. I think that continues, and I think with some of the things that are happening in the US and other parts of the world, that is a trend that is going to continue. So I think those are really important things to be thinking of.
Thank you, Matt. Does anybody have any? Sorry, Deb, were you going to?
I thought, if I may jump in, I can't agree with Matt more, and that's one of the things, like he said, we're doing more of, especially with our researchers, and why I guess we've got you on board as well, Vicki, trying to see the other aspect of research, because like Matt said, if we can't attract that money to continue our work, then we can't do it. So. And it's important for researchers to see both sides of it, I think. So, and I hope Hannah, especially at the first stages of your career, it's so important that you get this now, so you have a better success, easier success, hopefully in the future. So.
Yeah, and I think I want to commend Hannah for actually stepping up today, because I called her at 10 o'clock and said, Hannah, are you available to join the call? And to be fair, you did, and which is amazing. You've really got some great points to share, and I'm looking forward to sitting in one of the audiences in the future when you're sharing your research outputs at some stage as well. I'm looking forward to that as well. Does anybody have any other final comments in relation to, like, we have International Women's Day coming up? Is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything that you want to touch upon of what we've said today, or what you've all said? Any final comments?
From me, it's a big thank you. Thank you to you, Vicki, for organising it, and Hannah, coming in so late in the day and doing such a good job. Thanks. And Joanne, as always, you're always there to help, and Matt, same. But also to everyone who's tuned in. I hope that everyone found it interesting, and that we'll have you join us again for our next webinar, because I think we can do a lot more sharing what we do, but we'd love more communications from you and what we could do better next time as well.
Yeah, thank you, Deb, and that's a great segue to the next part, because we've actually got our next Accelerate Impact series session during National Volunteers Week, which is the week commencing the 19th of May, and we've got some great speakers. And Paula, one of our colleagues, is going to be on the panel as well, so she'll be there and sharing some of the great work that not only WIRF volunteers are doing and the profound impact that they're doing in the community, working with women and infants and families to drive positive change and shape healthier, more equitable futures, but it's also other volunteers as well to support that. And we're going to be looking at mental health as well. We'll be touching on that area as well. So really excited for the next one. So stay tuned, everybody, for the next session. If you don't have any more questions, that's everything from us. And thank you all again, and I echo what Deb said there, for joining today. And thank you so much to all our panel guests, and looking forward to interacting with you all in the future.
Thanks, Vicki. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.